All right, there's a new bill in town, and if you're a business owner who hires remote workers or contractors overseas, or you're considering doing that, then this episode is for you. The 2025 Hire Act is stirring up headlines with its bold push to crack down on outsourcing and fund American jobs. But what does it actually say? Who's impacted? And how should small businesses prepare? In this episode, we're breaking it all down in plain English. No politics, just practical insight. All right, welcome back to the Unfiltered Profit podcast. Caitlin and I are going to talk about the Hire Act today, which was introduced by Senator Moreno of Ohio. And it has a little bit of bipartisan support. So there were 3 Republicans, 1 Democrat on the bill. This is not a political podcast, and this is not going to be a political episode at all. We're not going to say whether we want it to pass or don't want it to pass or anything like that. We're just going to talk about what's in it, how you should pay attention to it, and what it means for you as you're planning some strategic growth in your business.
Yeah, it surprisingly applies to more than I think any of us thought as we started to hear the rumors of this and then saw that it had been formally introduced. It'll
Yeah.
be timely, is because I think both of us were surprised. If this passes in its original form as it stands now, it goes into effect on the 1st of 2026, so the 1st of January, which is not as far away. I really thought it was like a 2-year out thing.
Yeah. Yeah, not we're almost at 3 months away from the
Right.
first, which is crazy, at least at the time of recording this.
Yes.
And I think we're going to push this should come to your ears soon after recording because this is a very timely topic. And I think this was originally introduced and pushing more for IT companies or is it
Mhm.
like IT support or like customer support of that? But it's got far reaching extensions for small businesses.
Yeah, before maybe we go too far, just in case you're listening to this and you forget, don't remember, forgot like our little lessons on how a bill works. So this is a bill. It's been introduced. There are many steps it will have to go through before this is law. So the Senate introduced it. So if they flesh this out, vote on it, pass it, the House will have to do similar. They'll have to pass the same thing. President has to sign it. So we've got some ways away. But I believe the intent was basically to find a way to tariff services is the language I have heard around it. The idea being that we've been tariffing to get manufacturing back in the US, but we actually have a lot of services that have been outsourced overseas. And so how do we make it less attractive to do that and bring the jobs back? I'm guessing that's somewhat influenced by the jobs reports we've been seeing lately and the frustration maybe on a national level of where are all the jobs?
And I know I'll speak just as a small business owner myself, but some of it is frustrating because you're like, well, it's also hard to find good help,
Yeah.
right? That's the old adage. Our parents and everybody it's hard to find good help, but it also is true. Like in our industry, we've seen a major drop in college students wanting to get accounting degrees. Like we
Mhm.
do not have the same workforce that we had when you and I were going through college and before that. So some of it's hard. It's hard to sit back as a business owner and go, well, great. It's all fine and dandy. We can flesh out the financial side of this, but where am I going to just find that US worker that wants to do that thing?
Yeah, and especially in these specialized areas, like we've said, the accounting industry struggles. I have no doubt IT does. And so when you can broaden your workforce, because we work remotely and you can broaden it internationally, suddenly you have a lot more talent to pick from, which can be helpful.
Yeah.
So what's in the bill, Shauna?
Yeah, let's dive into this. So, first of all, there is a penalty for payments made to foreign workers. And so I'm going to actually pause on the foreign worker piece for a second
Yeah.
because we have a lovely employee of ours who is a dual citizen. If you know much about our company, Kayla and I military spouses and we like to hire military spouses. So we have a military spouse that has dual citizenship and she lives outside of the US, but she is a US citizen. This does not apply to that. Like she is not a foreign person because she is a US citizen. So I think we have to consider those aspects because we do have some expats
Mhm.
that live in other parts of the world. So this is applying penalties to payments to foreign workers. So basically, there's a 25% excise tax penalty put on those payments. Pay them $50 an hour. overall you need to add 25% to that of like a penalty that is going to hit you for making that payment.
Mhm.
Second part, that's painful. That's penalty. You're like, okay, I can make
Yeah.
that work. Then no tax deduction for payments to those workers. So now those payments were reducing your net income. Makes sense. You're not going to have to pay tax on that. Now they no longer reduce your net income and you are paying tax on those dollars.
Yes.
So,
And no
second,
deduction for the additional penalty. So, like, all of
right.
that piece. So, like, the wages that you initially had. So, even if you retrained your brain and you're like, okay, it was a $50 an hour employee, now it's a $62.50 an hour employee, that's fine. You can't deduct the 62 and a half. I mean, it's not a pretty position tax
Right.
wise.
Yep. And then obviously with that comes some new reporting where you're basically having to admit that you hire these foreign workers. And so they're trying to make it painful, right? Like that's the whole point so that it makes you want to bring those jobs back stateside as much as you possibly can.
Right. But it's not ever that easy, right? We know that as a small business owner to pivot and to adjust and to be like, of course it's fine. So with that, it's not just IT. It is not just accounting. I mean, there are so many contractors. So even if they're not employees, it's foreign persons. They haven't distinguished between an employee or a contractor.
Yep.
So if your graphic design person is overseas in the Philippines or India, where we see it quite common with our clients, they are now part of this. Those payments to them are now disallowed. The excise tax is applied. And so suddenly when you're budgeting, it's a lot harder to figure out what to do because arguably a US employee is going to have a higher wage, but at
Yep.
least you can deduct that. So at least I'm not paying taxes on an expense that I couldn't take.
Yeah. So there's a lot of math that has to go into that, right? If I have to pay a US employee this plus taxes and benefits or, whatever, you have to do your whole this is how much that person cost me on an hourly basis. And now let me take an offshore rate, add the penalties, take that tax impact, see if they balance out. And the reality is like they might get to the point where it's still like, well, it's not enough of a penalty to make me change my decision, which we might see.
Yeah, and we very well might. The thing is to keep in mind this is the introduction. So we don't know how this is going to morph and be manipulated over the next couple months if it ends up passing. So
Yep.
25% could become 30, 35. It could become 10. We don't know. What we know is they've kind of put this stake out there. What's timely about it is like Sean and I were having discussions. If we expand, when we make our next hire, where do we want to hire from? Does it make sense to keep that onshore? Does it make sense to offshore? And just seeing this drop and seeing that it has some bipartisan starts to bring the question of like, but do we want to invest that time in that training, in that education, in onboarding? None of that is cheap. So if you are in an expansive period and you are looking to hire in the next couple months, suddenly this potential is enough to kind of draw you up short and be like, well, I don't know. I don't know
Right.
what the answer is. I do know it's going to impact me if I'm hiring overseas. And if I put in all that effort and it turns out I can't afford it 6 months down the road, I'm going to have such a costly onboarding and swap to the US.
Right. And then you walk through all of that again and all that momentum you've built in your business down
Oh,
the tubes.
yeah. And that's this is the hard part about small businesses. And this is the part where anybody in small business will be like, all we want is certainty, right? We just want to know.
Hmm.
We want to know. We want to make decisions. But we are coming up on annual planning time. We'll have a podcast episode on that. And so this is the time that you need to be looking at this potential. If you do have a strong staff that's overseas, can you continue to afford it? So play out, like this is where the bookkeepers and the accountants and those number nerds come in. Play out the worst case scenario. What does it look like with a 25, 30, 35% tariff? What does it look like if I can't take that deduction? Can I still afford it? Do I want to still afford it? What are you
Right.
going to do to make it happen?
And I know, like, for us, ideally, we want to keep all of our positions stateside.
Yeah.
Is also, like we mentioned, very hard to sometimes find that talent stateside. And so you have to factor that in too. And I know the big corporations are going to do that, right? They're going to say, well, we just simply can't find those people. I don't
Mhm.
care what you throw at it. We're just going to have to like eat it or raise prices. And so at the end of the day, it's going to be interesting to see how this
Yeah.
morphs with the lobbying and such that would go on with this. So who knows if it will pass, but I do think it's something important to keep in mind, again, as you're facing that annual planning, which is where we've been with it.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting. And then the other piece to keep in mind is lobbying. So we have lots of big companies with a very vested interest in this. They put their dollars behind it. This could completely shrivel up and disappear. It could continue. It depends on, again, where those lobbying dollars. The other piece being that you, if you're a US citizen, you have a voice. You get to call. So if you have an opinion about how you want this to go, this is the time. If you've ever followed me on Instagram, I usually will bring these up when we see them as bills, because that's when we have the loudest voice. By the time it's gone through all the negotiation, your senators and congressmen aren't listening to you as much anymore. By like that time, they've made their trades. They're going through with whatever that trade was. Now, though, is the time to call up and say, please go, please don't go, whatever the case may be. Give your reasons, give the like data behind how this would affect you one way or the other, and use your voice, use the system that we have available to you, because this is not going to just affect the corporations. It is going to affect those like solopreneurs who use a contractor overseas to be their VA or whatever the case may be. As of now, there's no like threshold on size.
Yeah. Which is always so funny because this stuff is, I mean, if I had to guess, this is targeting bigger corporations,
Yeah.
right? They don't necessarily want to go impact small businesses with it, but you can't not. Like, it's for everybody. Everybody's a business. But definitely not the time to panic about it. But do think smartly about it and see if maybe it pauses your hiring decision, or like, who knows? You have to figure that out for yourself. But it's a good time to stay on top of the developments of this because, again, if it passes in whatever form, January 1, it starts.
Yeah. It's just, that's so quick. So I'm very curious. I'm very curious if they can even get this discussed by then.
Right. Yeah. Can
But
they agree on anything between now and January 1st, given that we also have the holidays in that time period?
Right, because they all disappear mid-December. So, like, while we're not politics, I think we can all admit that, unfortunately, our politicians have some of the longest breaks around, and they're going to disappear from Washington by, like, December 15th.
Must be nice.
Right. But yeah, so guys, that is the Hire Act. We wanted to get something that you could keep and re-listen to into your hands. This could completely shrivel up, and in 3 months we pull the podcast because this never went anywhere. But our hope is that you at least are informed. You know a little bit about this. As you do your annual planning these next couple months, play out these scenarios, put pen to paper, and just see what it looks like so you can make those informed decisions as opposed to coming from a place of fear that you can't move at all.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us this week on Unfiltered Profit, and we look forward to being in your ears next week.
See you guys later.